Today we are talking about my amp. This is a 1973 Silverface Fender Twin, and I got it in 1996, I think. And I got it at Guitar Center for under 500 bucks, which by today's standard, that's definitely a steal. And most people would never do what I've done to this amp if they actually went out and bought one today. So anyway, I want to talk about what I did with this, what has been done with this. This is not the kind of thing that most people would ever want to do these days. And if you are going to ever do something like this, don't tell anybody that I said to do it this way. Tell your tech what you want, and then have your tech sort out the math. So I did not do all this by myself. I did this also with paid professionals. You know, this isn't like I just woke up one day and just started goofing around with this thing. 20 years ago, I basically had this made into a preamp, and then all I've done is just fiddle with some of the preamp components and stuff. So, but anyway, let's get this thing opened up here, and we'll show you how how this thing's put together on the inside. So you can fast forward through this part. This is the part where I take the cover off. Okay, so just fast forward through this. Okay, there you go. So I like, obviously it normally has screws in it, but this is what I call prototype mode, because this amp is really a prototype. It's a working prototype. It's something that is kind of gone along with the guitars over the years. So I created this cabinet for it so that it would be easy to work on, because once you take one of these traditional Fenders apart a few times, you're like, wow, this was really a pain. So this is all designed to make this more simple to maintain, work on. If it worked forever, there wouldn't be amp techs. So okay, so there she is. Basically, the way Jerry Garcia ran his Fender Twins after about 1973-74 with the wall of sound was you had a separate power amp. And so in this setup here, I've got a Crest Audio 4601 stereo power amp. It's about 300 watts per side. And I've got this one, which is a Crest 2001, and I think it's like 100 watts per side. No, it's 75 watts per side on that one. This one's for smaller gigs, small little bars and stuff, coffee shops type size places and stuff. And so that's in a separate rack, and it's got its own digital reverb. And then this rack has two different digital reverbs from ADA and a GCX to switch them around, but I rarely use the GCX. So the idea is you preamp it with the tubes, and then you run it into a solid state power amp, and then into JBLs. And you really need JBLs to get that Jerry Garcia sound. And so that's my main thing. For me, it's all about sounding like Jerry Garcia. It's like, I love the way it sounds, and I love playing it, and I probably spend, over the course of my life, I probably spend, 3 hours a day either listening to the Dead or actually playing, like, with the sound that Jerry played for an average of 3 hours a day. So it adds up to a lot of time. My ear is very developed on all this stuff. That's why I do it. So anyway, let's start with the beginning. The first thing I had done with this amplifier was to have a preamp output installed. That's what this is. And this line comes off of the last capacitor, the last coupling capacitor, which is this one. And so this was the first thing I had done. And then after that, I had my amp tech at the time in Chicago take out the whole power section. And so what he did was he gave me a deluxe reverb transformer here and took out the whole power section, and he took out, I found out later, took out some capacitors. We'll talk more about those when I look at the schematic, but these are the ones that he put in. They're about 20 years old, so these are going to be on my list, and so are these diodes. They're going to be on my list to trade out at some point. And this guy here, almost everything else has been traded out. So, as I mentioned, I got this fancy Oricap coupling capacitor and a combination of carbon composite resistors on the plates. I'm sorry, metal film on the plates, and then carbon composites in other places. For me, there's certain sounds that different capacitors and different resistors make. So as you can see, I've got a bunch of orange drops in there, and other new capacitors. I bought a kit from Tube Depot to do all the cathode resistors in the whole setup. So you buy all the capacitors, the little ones, you know, and then you can get a kit, I think from Tube. It might have been Antique Electronic Supply, but they're not too hard to find. I would recommend that for anybody because it's a real simple thing to just, if you've got an older amp like this, it's real simple to just change that stuff out, you know. The tone circuit stuff, I traded that out mostly because I just, you know, was playing with it. And so I don't even know what the values of a lot of these even are. So if I had to replicate this, it would be somewhat difficult. But I know kind of what I was trying to do. So anyway, so modifications, other modifications. This is a hum balance pot that balances between the two legs of these guys. So you can even out the voltage of the two. I still have the original resistors where they go normally. So I like keeping stuff stock if I can, because as much as I've done to bastardize this, I saved all the components, and I haven't done much but, you know, I might have drilled a couple holes, but I don't even know if I even did that. Most of this is all original. You know, there's a lot of stuff's missing, of course, but so as you can see, I've got a bright knob as opposed to a bright switch. And so that basically is just giving me control over the brightness. And then, but the thing about this preamp that makes it great is all this stuff is very clean. And it's almost a little harsh. I think with these metal films, you get a little harshness. But I think it's worth it because with the controls, they get muddy real easily. And so what I like to do is I like starting with the cleaner stuff here because I know these are going to suck tone out. And so then what I do is I suck it out with the passive EQ the way it needs to be sucked out of there. So okay, so we can't talk about these amps without talking about how, in my mind, the spring reverb is probably at least 50% of why I do it this way. Because I've tried amp simulators and things like that, and they kind of get the main tone somewhat good enough, but they never get the reverb right. There's just nothing like real spring reverb. So the way my reverb is set up, I've got it in the back of the amp, in the back of the cabinet, hanging in a bag there. And I've actually got two tanks in there. The one you see right there is the Accutronics type that came out of a Hammond cabinet. And then there's another one in there that shares the bag. And with that one is a 3-spring from MOD. And it works pretty good. It's got a very long tail on it though, so that's why I've got the other Accutronics one that's more of a normal length decay. And depending on the bar, I'll change one or the other. Sometimes if it's a real kind of ringy room with a lot of glass, then I'll do the shorter tank reverb, the shorter time, just because that kind of keeps it quicker. And that way I can always use the delay for the bigger sound. So it's kind of like in a small bright room, you want to start clear and then add your depth with the digital delay. So I said reverb before, but these are digital delays. So this has also got chorus on there. So I've got a pedal here that controls the ADA 2FX. So I can get chorus going for Pink Floyd stuff, and then delay, and then these all have their own dedicated pedals. This pedal is for the 2FX, and this pedal is for the 1-second delay. So I wanted to show a couple things. Number one, see how the chord is like that? That's how I do it every time I open up the top. Obviously, I was goofing around earlier, but every time I go to work on this is the first thing I do, is put the cord on the floor with the cord in front of the amp so that I know for sure that it's not plugged in. The other thing I do is, see this cable here, this is when I'm actually working on the guitar, I have it set up so in order for the solder gun to get hot and for the light to work, I have to switch over this plug. So it's impossible for me to be soldering and being able to see at the same time as the amp is hot. And then when I want to test it, then I plug this in, unplug the other stuff, and that keeps me one thing or the other. So my setup is I've got a small solder gun and then a larger one for the chassis. Nice little fan here, and this is cool. This is a pop filter, but I put it here like this so the fan is blowing air on me, but not on what I'm working on there. So it's pretty nice little setup for working on the guitar amp. So let's go to the schematic. Okay, here's a Fender Twin Reverb schematic, and this might not be exactly the right one for my amp, but it's close enough to demonstrate what I did and what was done to this amp. So okay, so it looks like my amp tech guy took these reservoir capacitors out of here, probably because it didn't need all this power for these upper tubes. These are the power section tubes. So, and there's no choke either. So my standby switch goes directly to these 3 caps that you saw earlier, those Sprague Atoms. And so it looks like these are still in place, these diodes. These go to the pilot light and the 6.3 volt heaters. So what I do is I test each side of this until they balance, but you can also do it by your ear. Your ear kind of will get you in the ballpark. So there's no choke. These are there, and then all this is gone. There's no vibrato. So where I'm picking up my signal is right here. So this is right after the last coupling capacitor. So this is my signal right here, and I've tried putting a resistor after this spot to calm it down for more modern power amps that don't seem to like the headroom. But with those Crest Audio ones, now I just pick it up right there. So, okay, so all this is still in the amp. Here I've got a 12AX7, but here in this part of the preamp, what I call the kind of the business end of this thing. This is a 12AU7, which is less gain than a 12AX7. And so what that does is with these controls here, all these controls now are very sensitive. You can take this from a very quiet signal to a fair amount of preamp gain with just one tube. And all this is kind of designed to work with the changes that I've made to the potentiometers in here. And although I don't really remember exactly what I did, I know I increased this one, this middle, because what that does is that flattens out your frequency response. And so I use a tone calculator for that. So that's a whole nother subject. But for the purpose of this video, so here's my bright cap, and then in between here there's just a variable resistance via a potentiometer that I think is not even, there's no ground on this. It's just an in series for that, and then this value's been changed. Almost all these values have been changed from stock. I just don't remember. The cathode stuff is all pretty stock. That's for both of these, and this one here up here too, down in here with the reverb circuit. All this stuff is just stock. So anyway, you get the idea. So all this is gone, but the thing about it is, I don't know if this is the best way to do this. So if you're going to have this done, you know, obviously get a tech that knows what they're doing to, you know, to this section here, because this is not something that I designed that is that way. It just is. Oh, and of course this is gone too. This ground switch, that's all gone. Got a nice three wire correctly done, and the receptacle is also proper. So that's that. There's no reverb pedal. I think that's pretty much it. It seems real simple. The thing about this is with so few components that where the sound comes through, each component makes a, you know, you can hear the difference between a lot of these, and especially the tubes also. I really think that in a lot of ways, these electronics that I've got figured out is so I can hear the difference between the tubes, because when you make a circuit like this precise enough, you can really hear the difference between different tubes, different gain tubes. A lot of tubes, they might have the same, you know, number, but man, they can be very different in gain. Obviously, tube guys know this because that's what they do. They have testers and all this, but I'm just, you know, from my point of view, just from my experience, I can tell you that a lot of them come out different in different manufacturers. Tubes are very important for this amp because the sound only goes through 3 tubes. So by choosing different types of tubes for each 3 positions, I can dial in the sound that I want. And as I'm starting to learn now, tubes don't last as long as they used to. I don't know if that means I need to get new filter caps. My diodes might be on the edge, so I'm definitely going to be changing those soon. But I used to leave my amp hot, you know, plugged in all the time and idling, and I'm not doing that anymore just because I have a lot of tubes that I like, and I don't have money to go out and, you know, on eBay and buy some good ones. I've got enough good ones to kind of get me by for now. It doesn't mean I'm not going to buy probably, you know, 5 or 6 this summer. I just like having them. And so the way I got this set up, and this is important, is I've got my ATs here. So I got 2 extra of those. I've got 2 extra AYs if I want to use those. And those are not as powerful as an AX7. So sometimes I might want to use these. And then up here we have our AX7s. Lots of different types. Here's a JJ. What else? I got a lot of Hammond stuff. What are some other types? Yeah, these are Hammonds, and they don't have much paint left on them. But anyway, so I keep all my 12AX7s here. ATs, reverb drivers. AY is a little less powerful. And then these are all my AUs. And look at this, I even have a side getter. It's got the getter on the side there. So I got these guys. That way, and what I do is I'll go through a day where I'll, every once in a while, you know, like once a year or something, I'll just go through this case and I just go through and make sure all the tubes work. That way, if I'm ever at a gig and I've got a problem, wham bam. I mean, this is so easy to get to. You know, all you got to do is you grab a tube and you look at the bottom, and you know that it's, the gap is going to be right about there, and you reach underneath here like that. I also have a cover for the front of this that I use. So that's how it works. And yeah, so the tubes. Then this is kind of the tube boneyard. It's got some British. I think these are British. These are British AUs. Yeah. Or no, these. Yeah, these. This is American. This is a. Yeah, it says USA. There we go. AU7 USA. So yeah, I got a lot of USA stuff. I got a handful of those. I got some British ones. I don't know what the British ones are. Yeah, so that's Hammond. Oh yeah, here we go. Britain. There we go. Britain. Okay. Okay, just in case you're wondering, you know, what it would sound like with a Strat, as opposed to the neck through exotic hardwood guitar that I built and play. This is a junior Strat that I literally found in the garbage that had been through the hurricane, and I cleaned it up and adjusted the action a little bit, just did a few things, and this was actually my only functioning guitar for about a week when I was taking all the other guitars apart to redo them during the hurricane break, you know. So this actually was one of my functioning guitars, even before the power came back on. I had a whole setup when I could play with a car amplifier that plugged into one of my speakers. So anyway, so here's the Hurricane Cat 5 Junior Strat. One more thing, the last video that I did about this amp ended up being about an hour long. So this is kind of a condensed version. If anybody has any specific questions, they can email me